What happened to the deputy prime minister was reprehensible, but not surprising.
I've watched that video a number of times, and every single time it turns my stomach. It's unacceptable.
I think it's incumbent on all of us as political leaders, but also as citizens, to not accept this kind of behavior. One of the hallmarks of democracy is being able to disagree in a way that is peaceful, civil, and respectful.
Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland's cabinet colleagues reacting there to some of the tape that we saw over the weekend, that confrontation between her and her staff in Grand Prairie with an irate man who was calling her out, and he was making a scene there at the the City Hall in Grand Prairie. Tory leadership candidates Jean Charest and Scott Aitchison and Pierre Poilievre have been calling since that incident for a more respectful political debate. But the question is, what will it take to turn down all this political heat? Let's bring in the power panel, shall we? Political strategist Sharan Kaur is in Toronto, as is Amanda Galbraith, principal at Navigator, and Council Public Affairs is Brad Lavigne. And here with me in studio is former CBC Parliamentary Bureau Chief and my old boss, Rob Russo.
You had no boss. You were untamable.
I was a lone operator. Yeah. So, this is not new, is it, Rob? I mean, we've seen this before. Obviously, the Prime Minister had some gravel and rocks thrown at him in the last federal election campaign. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh faced a lot of harassment in the Ontario election campaign when he was a surrogate for that party. And now we're seeing this in Grand Prairie over the weekend. Do you think this is just the new normal?
It's worse, and it's old too, as you say. I mean, I was with Brian Mulroney in Toronto and Vancouver during free trade debates, and people were vicious. People struck his wife with signs. Profanity was hurled. What's different now, there is the ability for some of this vitriol to go right into your phone, right into your laptop, and it is disturbing. Quebec has taken a particular stand on this issue. Since René Lévesque was the Premier of Quebec, he mandated that all ministers, when they're on official business, have security, people who can drive and provide security who are armed. They're in effect special constables. And people know about it in Quebec, and that's not the case here in Ottawa. I think between February the 5th and the end of March, according to Alexandre Sirois from La Presse, there were about 35 serious threats aimed at the Prime Minister and at cabinet ministers. I imagine that hasn't abated, that sort of thing has gone on. So I think that there needs to be a review of security, particularly for members of cabinet. And the Quebec example, I think, is one that's worth studying closely.
Sharan, we kind of pride ourselves, though, in this country of being able to access our politicians, that there isn't a wall of Secret Service agents or something like that. Do you think that those times are over, though? Are the good times over? And do we really need to start thinking about kind of upping our game when it comes to police and security?
Absolutely. This is a topic I've harped over for years now, particularly just because I've having seen it, and specifically after the 2019 election, I would say. But Canada's a G7 country, and when you send your ministers even overseas, if you look at all the other counterparts out there, they've got a bevy of security guards around them. And here you see Canadians walk in, and I know it's a bit charming where it's like you walk in with 3 staffers or 2 staffers and no security guard, and everyone's like, oh, look, it's so nice. That's Canada. They don't need that. But I've seen it firsthand out here. I've seen how vicious it gets. And unfortunately, I'm not going to blame this on any individual politician, but the rhetoric that is being thrown out there constantly is allowing these people who feel like they can go up to the Deputy Prime Minister and scream and hurl insults and swear. They think it's okay because somebody else out there is equally saying this is, or using really coded or strong language. So I think it's about time. And I remember sitting down in multiple meetings when I was in Ottawa, begging for people to take security of ministers seriously, because it's not, and the public does not see the breadth of, I would say, risks that really come in behind the scenes. And there's a lot, and it's scary. So something needs to happen before someone gets killed, to be honest.
Yeah, Amanda, Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leadership candidate, was asked about this out in British Columbia this weekend, and he said, it was reprehensible. But he also said, I've faced something like this too. It's not just the deputy prime minister. I've had to bring on security because of some of the questionable characters that have been hanging out around my campaign. This does not seem to be unique to one party, does it? I mean, it really does cut across the political stripes.
No, for sure. And certainly I think, candidly, the image of Chrystia Freeland, as we know, she's a smaller woman, right? And this giant man towering over her menacingly, calling her all kinds of names, is very jarring. And she's just got female staff with her, right? And I've been a female staffer with a politician being threatened, and it's technically your job to get in there because there's no security. And it's stressful. It's not something that I didn't sign up to be a WWF wrestler. I signed up to be a political advisor. So
you could probably do that too, though.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty tough. But not maybe that tough. Not like 6'5" bearded, shirtless man tough. So I think it does cut across party lines. I've certainly worked with male politicians when it's happened. I've worked with female politicians when it's happened. I've had politicians who have had death threats, and we've had to. They were not like the people that were making them were not well, but we just had to kind of watch out for them, which is kind of insane. So I think certainly this needs to be taken more seriously. I actually quite like the Quebec model. I don't think it interferes with accessibility of politicians. It's not like it's a wall if it's one person staffing. And I think it would make a lot of sense.
Brad, Karina Gould was on the program earlier and I asked her about this, and she suggested it's really this kind of ramping up of some of this hate and vitriol and just questionable behavior is in large part because of the pandemic. A lot of people aren't well right now, right? A lot of people have been locked up for so long and they really haven't had normal social interactions. They've been online, they've been reading some questionable conspiracy theories. You know, they've really gone down the rabbit hole in a lot of this. Do you think that there is something to be said for what the government is proposing, which is maybe bringing in some sort of online hate legislation to maybe try and cull some of this material that people are reviewing?
Yeah, maybe. Okay, a number of things in that question. And we're talking about protecting the politician, which we should be, and that's kind of at the back end. What we also need to talk about is at the front end. That is why is it getting worse? I think it's fair to say that it's getting worse. And Rob mentioned the fact that we can all now see that encounter on our phones and on our computers at home. So we kind of live the experience along with the politician. We weren't able to do that 25, 30 years ago. But this goes back before the pandemic. I mean, Rachel Notley, Shannon Phillips, Minister of Environment, former Premier of Alberta, had to have police escorts because of the death threats there. That was 2016, 2017, before the pandemic. There's no question that the pandemic has had a toll on Canadians' mental health. But I also think that there's a level of acceptance that maybe is catching us off guard, where the level of rhetoric going on in Canadian politics, which I think is influenced by some degree what we're seeing in the United States, because we consume so much of the American content, and many Canadians consume the American content, that the level of discourse in the States, I think, is beginning to become much more prevalent in Canada, where and showing. I think the convoy was an example of how far we've allowed the discourse to go. That is, when politicians, when elected officials embrace individuals that are so far out the mainstream, it provides comfort for them, and it provides comfort for people who are like them. And I think that is part and parcel. I don't think it's one thing. But that is part of it. And we have to ask our politicians, are you aiding and abetting and providing comfort for these individuals, or are you standing up to them, calling them out, and calling it for what it is, which is hate? And is it mutually exclusive for when men experience the hate versus when women do? And I don't believe it is.
Okay, Rob, just quickly on this. Is it take more, though, than calling them out? Like, do we need to have some sort of legislative response?
Well, we certainly need to protect lives. I think Brad's right. You can go back to before the pandemic. Joe Cox, a Labour MP in the UK, was stabbed to death, caught on camera as well, by a right-wing zealot. So these tendencies are there. The ability actually to reach out and connect with politicians and threaten them, often from the cover of anonymity, is there as well. So people are going further and further than they used to before. They're emboldened by this. So I do agree with Brad as well in that the front end has to be looked at. Not only are people sad, perturbed, they're angry, they're exasperated, they're tired. The country is divided in ways it has not been divided before, over science, over vaccines, over a whole bunch of things that it wasn't divided over before. And we quite clearly need somebody to try and bring us together as well. So there's that end to be looked at as well.
Yeah, there's some healing to do, I think.
And JP, there's a difference between hate speech and free speech. I know a lot of people are going to say this is free speech. You can go online and say whatever you want. Yeah. But the stuff that is being said online is not necessarily free speech. It is hate speech.
That's true. Good point, Sharon. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.